Chapter 5 of North Pole Voyages by Zachariah A. Mudge. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 5 More Heroic Excursions. On the 7th of April, a week after the return of the party just noted, our explorers were startled by shouts from the shore. Dark figures were seen standing along the edges of the land ice, or running to and fro in wild excitement. It was not difficult to make them out as a company of Eskimos. Dr. Kane, seeing by their wild gesticulations that they were unarmed, walked out and beckoned to a brawny savage, who seemed to be a leader, to approach. He understood the sign and came forward without fear. He was full a head taller than the doctor, and his limbs seemed to have the strength of those of a bear. He was dressed with a fox-skin hooded jumper, white bearskin trousers, and bearskin boots tipped with the claws. Though he had evidently never before seen a white man, he manifested no fear. His followers soon crowded around and began to use great freedom, showing an inclination to rush on board the ship. This they were made to understand they must not do. Petersen came out and acted as interpreter, and matters went on more smoothly. The leader, whose name was Metek, was taken on board, while the rest remained on the ice. They brought up from behind the floes 56 dogs and their sledges, and thrusting a spear in the ice, picketed them about the vessel. While Dr. Kane and Metek were having their interview in the cabin, word was sent out that others might come on board. 9 or 10 mounted the ladder with boisterous shouts, though ignorant of how Metek had fared. They went everywhere, handled everything, talked and laughed incessantly, and stole whatever they could. Finally, all hands had to be mustered and restraint laid upon the Eskimo to keep them within due bounds. This they took good-naturedly, ran out and in the vessel, ate, and finally sat down like tired children, their heads drooping upon their breasts, and slept, snoring the while most famously. In the morning, before they departed, the commander assembled them on deck for an official interview. He enlarged upon his wonderful qualities as a chief, and the great benefits to his visitors of his friendship. He then entered into a treaty with them, the terms of which were very few and simple, that it might be understood, and the benefits mutual, that it might be kept. He then showed his beneficence by buying all their spare walrus meat and 4 dogs, enriching them in compensation with a few needles, beads, and treasures of old cask staves. The Eskimo were jubilant. They voted, in their way, Dr. Kane a great captain, promised vociferously to return in a few days with plenty of walrus meat, and loan their dogs and sledges for the great northern journey, all of which they never remembered to do. When the visitors had gone, it was ascertained that an axe, a saw, and some knives had gone with them. Besides, the storehouse on Butler Island had been entered, and a careful survey of the vicinity revealed the fact that a train of sledges were slyly waiting behind some distant hummocks for a freight of its treasures. All this had a hard look for friendly relations with the Eskimo, but our explorers felt that conciliation with quiet firmness was their best policy. The savages could do their sledge excursions much harm, and if they would, could greatly aid them. The next day there came to the vessel 5 natives, 2 old men, a middle-aged man, and 2 awkward boys. They were treated with marked kindness. Some presents were given them, but they were told that no Eskimo would in future be admitted to the brig until every stolen article was restored. They were overjoyed at the gifts, and departed lifting up their hands in holy horror on the mention of theft. Yet In passing round Butler Island, they bore away a coal barrel. M'Garry was watching them, and he hastened their departure by a charge of fine shot. Notwithstanding all this, one of the old men, known afterwards as Shung Hu, made a circuit round the hummocks and came upon an india-rubber boat which had been left upon the floe, and cut it in pieces and carried off the wood of a framework. Soon after this, a sprightly youth, good-looking, with a fine dog-team, drove up to the vessel in open day. When asked his name, he replied promptly, "Myoke I am." He spoke freely of his place of residence and people, but when asked about the stolen articles he affected great ignorance. Dr. Kane ordered him to be confined in the hold. He took this very hard, at first refusing food. He soon after began to sing in a dolorous strain, then to talk and cry, and then to sing again. The hearts of his captors were made quite tender toward him, and when, in the morning, it was found that the prisoner had lifted the hatches and fled, taking his dogs with him, even the commander secretly rejoiced. April 25th, M'Garry and 5 men started with the sledge Faith on another exploring excursion. They took a small stock only of provisions, depending on the supply depots which had been made in the fall. The plan this time was to follow the eastern coast line a while, which ran north and west, cross over Smith Sound to the American side, where it was hoped smooth ice would be found, and once on such a highway they anticipated that the polar sea would greet their delighted vision, and maybe speak to them of the fate of the lost Franklin. 2 days after M'Garry's party left, Dr. Kane and Godfrey followed with the dog sledge loaded with additional comforts for the journey, the men trotting by its side. Only 3 dogs remained of the original supplies, which, harnessed with the 4 purchased of the Eskimo, made a tolerable team. 10 men, 4 in health and 6 invalids, were left to keep the vessel. Orders were left by the commander to treat the Eskimo, should they come again, with fairness and conciliation, but if necessity demanded to use firearms, but to waste no powder or shot. The credit of the gun must be sustained as the bearer of certain death to the white man's enemies. Dr. Kane and his companions overtook the advanced party in 2 days. They pushed forward together with tolerable success for 4 days more, when they all became involved in deep snowdrifts. The dogs floundered about nearly suffocated and unable to draw the sledge. The men were compelled to take the load on their backs and kick a path for the dogs to follow. In the midst of these toils the scurvy appeared among the men, and some of the strongest were ready to yield the conflict altogether. The next day, May 4th, Dr. Kane, while taking an observation for latitude, fainted, and was obliged to ride on the sledge. Still the party pushed on, but they soon met with an obstacle no heroism could overcome. They were without food for further journeying. The bears had destroyed their carefully deposited stores. They had removed stones which had required the full strength of 3 men to lift. They had broken the iron meat casks into small pieces. An alcohol cask, which had cost Dr. Kane a special journey in the late fall to deposit, was so completely crushed that the whole stave could not be found. On the 5th of May, Dr. Kane became delirious, and was lashed to the sledge, while his brave, though nearly fainting men, took the back track. They arrived at the brig in 9 days, and their commander was borne to his berth, where he lay for many days, between life and death, with the scurvy and typhoid fever. Thus closed another effort to unlock the secrets of the extreme polar region. Hans made himself exceedingly useful at this time. He was promoted to the post of hunter, and excused from all other duties. He was besides promised presents to his lady-love on reaching his home at Fiskernes. He brought in 2 deer, the first taken on the day of this special appointment. The little snowbirds had come, of which he shot many. The seal too were abundant, and some of them were added to the fresh provisions. These wonderfully improved those touched by the scurvy. One day Hans was sent to hunt toward the Eskimo huts, that he might get information concerning the nearness to the brig of clear water. He did not come back that night, and Dr. Hayes and Mr. Olsen were sent with the dog sledge to hunt him up. They found him lying on the ice about 5 miles from the vessel, rolled up in his furs, and sound asleep. At his side lay a large seal, shot as usual in the head. He had dragged this seal 7 hours, and getting weary, had made his simple camp and was resting sweetly. May 20th, Dr. Hayes and Godfrey started with the dog team to make another attempt to cross Smith Strait and reach, along the American side, the unknown north. The doctor was a fresh man, not having been with any previous party. The dogs were rested, well fed, and full of wolfish energy. The second day he fortunately struck into a track free from heavy ice, and made 50 miles. But this success was after the Arctic fashion, made to give bitterness to immediate failure. On the third day they encountered hummocks, piled in long ridges across their path. Some of them were 20 feet high. Over some of these they climbed, dragging after them both sledge and dogs. Long diversions were made at other times, and their path became in this way so very tortuous that in making 90 miles advance northward they traveled 270 miles. Snow blindness seized Dr. Hayes in the midst of these toils. But nothing daunted after short halts, in which his sight improved, he pushed on. But Godfrey soon broke down, though one of the hardiest of explorers. Their dogs too began to droop, the provisions were running low, and so the homeward track was taken. Before they reached the vessel they were obliged to lighten their load by throwing away 50 pounds weight of furs, the heaviest of which had been used as sleeping bags. This excursion resulted in valuable additions to the extreme northern coastline survey. On the afternoon of June 4th, M'Gorry, with 4 men, started on a last, desperate effort to push the survey on the Greenland side, 100 miles further, by which Dr. Kane thought the limits of the ice in that direction might be reached. Morton, one of the company, was to keep himself as fresh as possible, so that when the rest came to a final halt, he might be able to push on further. Hans was kept at the vessel until the 10th, 4 days later, when he started light with the dog sledge to join them. His part was to accompany Morton on the final run. The hunter of the vessel being gone, Dr. Kane, who was now much better, took his rifle to try his skill at seal hunting. This animal is not easily taken by unpractised game seekers. He lies near the hole which he keeps open in the ice, and at the slightest noise plunges out of sight. Seeing one lying lazily in the sun, the doctor lay down and drew himself along softly behind the little knobs of ice. It was a cold, tedious process, but finally getting within a long rifle shot, the seal rolled sluggishly to one side, raised his head, and strained his neck, as if seeing something in an opposite direction. Just then the doctor saw with surprise a rival hunter. A large bear lay like himself on his belly, creeping stealthily towards the game. Here was a critical position. If he shot the seal, the bear would probably have no scruples about taking it off his hands, and perhaps, by way of showing that might makes right, take him before his rifle could be reloaded. While the doctor was debating the matter, the seal made another movement which stirred his hunter blood, and he pulled the trigger. The cap only exploded. The seal, alarmed, descended into the deep with a floundering splash, and the bear, with a few vigorous leaps, stood, a disappointed hunter, looking after him from the edge of the hole. Bruin and Dr. Kane were now face to face. By all the rules of game-taking, the bear should have eaten the man. He was the stronger party. The gun was for the moment useless. He was hungry, and had lost his dinner probably by the intrusive coming of the stranger, and, as to running, there was no danger of his escape in that way. But the bear magnanimously turned and ran away. Not to be outdone in courtesy, Dr. Kane turned and ran with all his might in the opposite direction. On the 26th, M'Garry, Bonsall, Hickey, and Riley returned. The snow had almost made them blind, otherwise they were well. They had been gone about 3 weeks, and made valuable surveys, and fully satisfied the expectations of their commander. Hans caught up with them after 2 weeks of heroic travel alone with his dogs and sledge. He and Morton had, in accordance with the programme, pressed on farther northward. The returned party had their adventure with the bear to tell. They had all lain down to sleep in their tent after a wearisome day of travel. The midnight hour had passed when Bonsall felt something scratching at the snow near his head, and starting up, ascertained that a huge bear was making careful observations around the outside of the tent. He had, in looking round, already observed, no doubt, the important fact that the guns and everything like a defensive weapon were left on the sledge some distance off, though perhaps the importance to him of this fact he did not appreciate. There was consternation, of course, in the camp, and a council of war was called. It had hardly convened before Bruin, as a party concerned, thrust his head into the tent door. A volley of lucifer matches was fired at him, and a paper torch was thrust into his face. Without minding these discourteous acts, the bear deliberately sat down and commenced eating a seal which had been shot the day before and happened to be in his way. By the laws of Arctic hospitality this should have been considered fair by the tent's company, for strangers are expected to come and go as they please, and eat what they find, not even saying by your leave. But the stranger did not conform to the usage of the country. Tom Hickey cut a hole in the back of the tent, seized a boat hook, which made one of its supporters, and attacked the enemy in the rear. He turned on his assailant and received a well-aimed blow on his nose, by which he was persuaded to retire beyond the sledge and there to pause and consider what to do next. While the bear was thus in council with himself, Hickey sprang forward, seized a rifle from the sledge, almost under the nose of the enemy, and fell back upon his companions. Bonsall took the deadly weapon and sent a ball through and through the bear, and the disturber of the rest of our explorers afforded them many bountiful repasts. End of chapter 5.